getting into a proper fighting stance. Proper fighting stance, the way that will work out is whenever I have my cane, I want to be able to have my cane either at my side here or behind my back. One of the things I don't want to do is I don't want to put a hole in the mat, so I don't want that near the mat whatsoever. So if I'm in a tension stance, I want to be able to hold the weapon. Notice my thumb is already ready and engaged. I'm going to step forward. I'm going to step forward into my fighting stance. I'm not going to step away. So I want to make sure that the cane and the weapon are on the same side of the hand and leg that should be in front. So if my leg is back and my weapon is here, that's going to be wrong. So make sure that the same arm and same leg are stepping forward into that fighting stance, and it shouldn't be opposite. So if this leg steps forward, this leg is back and the cane is back, I don't have the same reach as I would if I did with my weapon in the front side. So just kind of make sure your weapon is in the same hand and the same leg, and it should be in front, not the back. All right, so when we go to our fighting stance, there's two ways to do it for our cane. The first one is just our standard fighting stance. As we step forward, we're stepping forward, the cane is going to swing up into fighting stance. My hands come up. Notice this can also be a strike if I were to come up under the chin or come up under the groin. So this is a good, proper fighting stance. From a tension stance, stepping forward into my fighting stance, ready to fight. One of the things I want to look at is the tip of my cane should be even with the top part of my head. It shouldn't be below it because then my head is exposed. So look for your students and your participants to have all the weapons even with their head. Second fighting stance. Second fighting stance. This one's a little bit fancier. You're going to see some things that are going to be dropped, but here's the way this works. We start by holding the cane, and again, I don't want pressure on the floor, so barely have it away from the floor so it's not going to touch. But the hook of my cane, I'm holding it by the back of the butt of the cane and the hook. So as I start to go into my fighting stance, I step forward and I'm swinging now into my fighting stance. This is a little bit fancier. Is it optional? 100%, but it does look pretty cool when you do it. So as I step forward, I'm swinging the cane over my wrist, right? So this cane will now swing over my wrist into fighting stance. So the hook will be on the outside of my wrist, and I will swing the cane to the inside of my body, and then it will hook over and come up. So hook and over and come up. So I have to release the cane about halfway through, and it will come up into my fighting stance. So as I swing through, it will come up, around and into fighting stance. So I'm stepping from my attention stance into my fighting stance and swing up. Now, can I use this as an attack? 100%. I could use that as an attack to swing that weapon as I come into my fighting stance. I could use that as a strike. So again, options for our fighting stance are stepping forward and then also stepping forward with our swinging motion to try to get into fighting stance. Just make sure that that hook is turned the correct way so it's facing the outside of your body and not the inside. Otherwise, you're going to hit yourself in the face, and that would not be a good day. Strikes with the cane. When we go into offensive movements with the cane, first thing I have to think about is pushing and pulling power. So whenever I start swinging the cane, I'm not swinging it like a bat. I need to make sure that I have good, solid target areas to make sure that everything that I'm doing is going to be to a correct impact point, and I'm making sure I'm hitting with the blade of the cane. If I don't hit with the blade of the cane, if I hit on the side or if I hit in the back side of the shaft, the cane could break because the wood grain is not strong in some particular areas. So it is strong and reinforced on the blade side. So just make sure that you get all of the damage absorbed on the blade. I, again, personally recommend you to tape up your cane to make sure it's reinforced, and it's a good way to practice because you can see all of the damage comes on the blade side of my weapon. You'll take a look on the back sides. There's very little damage or very little discoloring because all of the damage is taken in the right spot. So it's very important to practice your techniques correctly, not necessarily fast. So the first thing we do is we step into our fighting stance. We've got a good grip. We've got our thumb on the back side for good edge and good control. First thing that I want to do is I want to exaggerate my movements. So as I come in with my inside strike is just going to be coming across. It's coming across to the jaw or to the temple. And as I do this, I'm not leaving this hand out. I'm making sure my hand stops it halfway across. My hand in the back comes to the inside of my bicep, and I'm striking across to the target. So opening up. As I open, my cane comes around to my back. And as I close, it comes around to the front. So opening up, touching my back, my elbows exposed, and then I come around. Open, and then close. My inside strike is striking right to the head. Now, can I go a little bit lower? Yes, but right now I'm looking at almost like a 45-degree angle strike that comes through, and I'm stopping it with good snap, and as I come back. So it's gonna come through, and then it's gonna come back. So striking, and then retracting. Striking, and then retracting. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. All right, so my inside strike will be done on both sides, so I will switch feet. When I switch feet, I don't want to just throw my weapon up and try to catch it in the other hand. That gives me potential to drop it. So as I go to switch feet, I'm literally punching through with my other hand and my other foot to be able to catch my weapon if I switch my feet. So as I switch, I want to make sure that I'm taking it out by punching through and not just bringing it back and bring the weapon closer to me, because that will leave me susceptible to getting attacked. So I want to keep the weapon out, so that way whenever I step to it, then I'm taking it and keeping my space and not retreating. So from switching one hand to the other, I'm coming through, I'm ready to strike. I open up on the other side, and I come through with my inside strike. My inside strike. Just like this. Again, I don't want this to come too far past, because then I'm exposed. I want to kind of stop at the center line of my body, which is close to my edge of my head, just kind of right at the center line for my head and jawline, opening up and then closing. So as I switch, I want to make sure that those components are key. Exaggerate your movements, so don't make them small. Outside strike. Outside strike is going to now come. So we know inside strike came across here. Outside strike, I'm going to make an X with my hands, and I'm going to come to the outside part of my body as I strike instead of the inside part of my body. So I make an X. The weapon is on the outside of my hand. My thumb is still there for good control. My hand is on the back side, so whenever I open up, I'm striking and coming across and making sure that I open up and then I close back up. Open and then close. My outside strike is coming to the temple of the jawline as I strike. So it's a 45-degree strike that's coming through, going to the outside of my body, striking across, right? Again, I don't want to open up too much, because if I open up too much, then my body's exposed. So I want to be able to strike nice and clear. So I'm striking and I'm finishing and then retracting back for my outside strike. Overhead strike. Overhead strike means I'm coming straight over the top. I'm cutting straight down the middle. When I do my overhead strike, I want to make sure that my elbow is placed very high. The cane's almost on my back, if not touching. So I want to take that overhead strike and I want to reach out and I want to pull. That's my pushing and pulling power. So as I begin to pull here, I've got more striking power by pushing forward and pulling back. So I'm striking to the top of the head. Even remember, I can strike to the fingers and things like that, but right now I'm aiming to cut them right in half. And again, I'm not stopping down low because I don't want to expose myself. I want to aim right at the top of the head and then stop. And then stop. Reach out with that hand to make sure that you're getting that good pushing and pulling. And whipping that tip of the cane right to the top part of that opponent's head. Overhead strike. Combination striking. Now we're at a point where now we know inside strike, outside strike, and overhead strike. So now we're going to put together our movements of those three in a combination. The three movements together, we're going to start by exaggerating. We're going to open up. We're going to start in our fighting stance. Of course, we open up, we go to our inside strike, and then we go to our outside strike, and then our overhead. So now we're putting the three together. Inside, outside, overhead. Inside, outside, overhead. Inside, outside, overhead. Notice my feet are stationary. I'm not moving yet. Everything that I'm doing is about big, clear, precise movements. High block. High block now is going to be part of our defense. So when we go into our defense, one of the things we're looking at is I want to make sure and cover my head. I don't want to have the weapon angled. I want to make sure it's not tipped one way or the other. It's flat, straight across. So I'm in my fighting stance. Tip of my cane is even with my head. I'm punching to the sky. I'm punching to the sky. I'm coming around, the weapon is gonna come across my body here. So this is called an outside high block, an outside high block. So I'm coming here, the weapon is coming across my body, and it's gonna make sure and cover my head. Now, there are multiple ways to do high blocks, but right now, the outside high block is the easiest and most efficient to learn. So as we start to come up, I'm punching to the sky, my thumb is back on the back side for edge, I'm using the blade of my cane for defense. As I come back, I don't drop the weapon here, so it doesn't just do this. I start from my fighting stance and I'm twisting the weapon into place. Twisting, and I come out. The hook is facing up, the blade is up, and the weapon is even for my outside high block. Defenses. Defenses. When we look at defense, now we're starting to think about blocking. Somebody's attacking us, so now we're going to go into our defensive movements and our blocking movements. So we're still using the blade of the cane for offense and defense. So whenever we start, we're going to be in our regular, our standard grip. We're going to step forward. When we come to our defense, it's going to look a lot like our offense. So and whenever we do this, you already know your inside strikes, your outside strikes. These are going to look super, super similar. The only thing that you'll change is maybe a little bit of foot position. So, or maybe even a little bit of turn of your body. So the inside defense or the inside block, as I come through, my body's going to come together and I'm going to come up and I'm going to defend the same way that I struck. So if somebody's doing an outside strike to me, I'm going to come across my body. So they're coming this way. I'm going to come across. I'm going to meet that weapon with my inside block. Now, the thing that you'll see that's different is I bring my leg up for defense because later we'll start attacking lower halves of the body. So that way you got to decide, are you attacking the upper half or the lower half? And this covers all the bases. So I'm not getting my foot struck, but I'm also defending the upper half of my body. My hand still comes to the inside of my bicep just like it did for the inside strike. The only difference between the inside strike and the inside block is my leg that comes up, right? So I'm retreating back into a stance where my weight is up, it's on the back leg, and I come across and I'm good and solid on my balance. The tip of my cane is even with my head, and then I come back down to my fighting stance. I open up the same way because I want to meet that force with force, and I block across, striking with the inside part of that blade for my inside block. So 1, reset, 2, reset, 3, 4, inside block. Outside block. Outside block is going to be something that we're going to do just like outside strike. Looks very similar to when we strike. That outside block, my leg may come up a little bit to try to look like I don't want to get struck low. So there's your only real change. The strike lines are the same. The chambers are still the same. My X marks the spot. So as I come across, I'm still using the blade of my cane. They're doing an inside strike. I'm doing an outside defense. I'm doing an outside block to be able to strike back and defend somebody that's striking. If you notice, I still open up. The only difference is my leg comes up in a retreating position. A retreating position. I reset every time. I chamber every time for my move. Reset. Outside block. Now let's get into your combination defenses. So whenever we get into our combination defenses, we have our offensive movements that were inside strike, outside strike, and overhead strike. Now we're going to get into inside defense, and then outside high block. Now, when we get into these movements, we are going to be stationary. We're not moving yet. So we're going to go with our inside defense first. Leg comes up, and then we reset. And then we go to our outside defense, bringing that leg up, and then reset. And then we've got our high block, our outside high block here. So then we go inside, outside, overhead. Now, when we do inside, outside, overhead, that terminology is still the same for our offensive movements. Inside, outside, overhead. Now we've got inside, outside, overhead. For our defense, the same thing. So now when we begin to exchange fight, we're going to have offense and defense. We're going to start in the same place. We're going to defend by doing offensive inside strikes, outside strikes, and overhead strikes, and we have to defend those. So whenever they go to strike, we go to our inside defense. Set, outside defense. Then overhead. Inside, outside, overhead. So now there's your defense back and forth for our beginning of exchange fighting.